Hey everyone, this is Ernie Svensson. I want to welcome you to this presentation on creating a paperless law practice. I am really excited about this webinar because it's a topic that I believe is of paramount importance to lawyers, especially those who practice in small firms. All right, so here from an overall perspective is what we will be covering in the next 45 to 50 minutes or so. First, I'm going to address the most common questions that lawyers have about creating a paperless practice, which I've heard over the years, probably over 12 or 15 years now. Then I will be talking about the essential equipment and the essential software that you will need to create a smooth running paperless practice. And then finally, I'm going to talk about managing digital documents. Okay, so let's get into the common questions that people have. Now, I know one thing that most of you are probably wondering about is how did I create a paperless practice? Like what led me to do that in the first place and how did it all unfold? So to explain all that briefly, let me tell you kind of how it happened, which was, first I graduated from law school in 1985, which is a long time ago. And for the first 18 years of my practice, I worked in a large New Orleans firm. And I handled complex commercial litigation cases that involved lots of paper. So those cases made my firm lots of money, which is nice for the firm. And those were the cases that I handled throughout my tenure at the big firm. After a few years there, I managed to make partner and I started making, good money. And at that point, basically, I had accomplished all the things that were supposed to make you happy, right? Except that somehow I became miserable. And it was because of things that had changed in the practice of law that affected my practice, namely soaring overhead, crazy billable hours, and mindless bureaucracy, all of which left me completely burned out and it got so bad that I seriously contemplated quitting the practice of law altogether. So I considered going on my own to start a simpler practice, one, that I could just run as a solo lawyer. But unfortunately, I couldn't just afford to quit because I couldn't realistically handle the paper-intensive business lawsuits that I was doing as a solo. But then, through a series of serendipitous events, I discovered how to create a paperless law practice. And it made my practice easier to manage because I could leverage powerful technology. And by leverage it, I mainly mean automating key workflows so that things got done faster, things got done better. And so that instead of begging people to do the work that I needed to have done, and then having to stay on top of them to make sure that they did it right, I could do it all myself, or most of it myself, with the help of computers and software. Now that was the discovery that allowed me to create a fulfilling solo practice. And it was fulfilling because I preferred practicing law as a scrappy solo lawyer than, mindless lumbering bureaucracy. And I'm not going to deny that there weren't challenges to starting a new firm and that there were challenges along the way. But what made it all worthwhile is that most of my time as a solo practitioner, I was ninja efficient and so streamlined that it felt like my practice was running on autopilot. I was able to work how I wanted, when I wanted, and wherever I wanted to, which gave me a tremendous sense of satisfaction and freedom. So other lawyers asked me, how was I able to do this? And that's when I started giving talks and happily showed them. I traveled around the country giving speeches to bar associations. I wrote articles and books for the American Bar Association, appeared on a bunch of different legal podcasts. And that's what I've been doing for well over a decade. I've been on a mission to help other lawyers transform their practices just like I did. And during that time, I've helped hundreds of lawyers change their practice and get breakthrough success, even so-called dinosaur lawyers who barely do email. But my biggest discovery by far in all that time is this. Any lawyer can learn to use technology to transform their practice, if they do it sensibly and strategically. And that applies especially to creating a paperless law practice. So today, I'm going to explain how you too can create a paperless practice, and to do so in a way that's smooth, sensible, and strategic, as opposed to frustrating, chaotic, and confusing. So let's talk about how you can do something amazing with your practice. And I'm not talking only about creating a paperless practice, but something far more exciting and beneficial. I want to talk to you about how you can radically streamline your practice and make it much, much easier to manage. Okay, so let's deal with the next question, which is how exactly will your practice become easier to manage if you shift to a paperless practice? And the answer to that is there are three phases that you go through And as you go through each phase, your practice will become increasingly streamlined and easier to manage. So first, you begin by digitizing most of the paper that's in your Matter files. Now, we'll get to what I mean by, quote, most of the paper in a little bit, but for now, just realize that this phase is not something you go through quickly, but it's important that you establish a strong foundation here for the next two phases. So next comes the automation phase. This is where you start to seriously leverage the power of digital technology. Because when you shed the surly bonds of paper, there's a lot you can automate and things that you probably have no idea that are possible. And automation at this level is amazing. I mean, it's truly mind-blowing. But it's also frustrating if you don't go about it in the right way. And I'd say that most of the lawyers who try to leverage automation actually become less productive and more frustrated. But if you do it the right way, then you start to see things like 80% returns on a 20% investment of either time or money. Now, finally, we get to outsourcing, and this is where your firm becomes superpowered beyond belief. But this phase also depends on you having digitized most of your papers. In this phase, you can hire people who are super knowledgeable about using computers and software, and you can hire them right now for any task that can be done by someone with a computer and internet access. And there's a lot to say about outsourcing, but the main point for now is you can basically multiply yourself or your staff members by using outsourcing if you do it properly. So today we'll be talking about the first phase, which is digitizing. And in this phase, there are three main aspects that will make your practice exponentially easier to manage. Number one, getting rid of most of your paper. Two, learning to manage your information in PDF form instead of paper. And three, taking advantage of cloud-based services and storage. Okay, so let's continue with responding to some of the common questions about going paperless. Should I start creating a paperless law practice? This is one that over the years people have, asked, should I start? Well, the answer to this question really is kind of surprising to most people because, frankly, everyone on this webinar and pretty much everyone practicing law is already paperless to some extent. And the answer is, the reason for that is because, for starters, you already own a computer and you have digital files, and you've learned to organize those digital files in a rudimentary way. You can use email to transmit information using the web, and all of those are skills that all of us have these days. So congratulations, you're more than halfway toward creating a paperless practice. So now the next step is getting rid of a lot more of the paper that you have right now. So that brings up the next common question that I get, which is, why should you get rid of paper? Now this is for people who are trying to hold out and they're saying, well, things are working fine the way they are. What's the big deal with paper? Okay, so let's talk about the big problem. And let's be realistic about something very fundamental, which is that paper by itself is not the problem. There's nothing inherently wrong with paper. I love paper. I have lots of it. I enjoy writing things down on paper. The problem is too much paper. That's the problem. And in the modern world that we live in, there's definitely too much paper. Now, why is that? Well, mostly because of the lowering cost of technology and the fact that low-cost computers are connected to low-cost printers, and everyone has these devices and knows how to use them. So they do, and paper is spewing out of printers located in homes and businesses across planet Earth, which is increasing the amount of paper that we have to store. So storing it is expensive, and it depends on where you live. New York City, storing paper is more expensive than in other cities, but the yearly cost comparisons show that paper is expensive to store no matter where you live. Organizing it is also very expensive, and moreover, organizing it is tedious and frustrating. I mean, just ask the people that do it. They're called paper pushers, and they don't like their jobs. So more and more businesses are automating their paper-based workflows, and they're doing so that they save time and money. For example, pilots used to carry bulky suitcases filled with navigation charts that were expensive and heavy and everything else. And nowadays they just carry iPads, which is convenient, can be updated more easily, and is simple, right? And the same is true in other professions like real estate agents. They're also interested in cutting down the amount of paper that they have to deal with. And of course, lawyers are doing the same thing. Now, big firms over the past few years have not been as motivated to shed paper. And that's probably because in large organizations, you can absorb more easily the frustration and inefficiency of, lots of different things, including managing large amounts of paper. Some firms, I would say, even make money by wasting paper, and at least they used to. I mean, I remember when my big firms, when I started there, we used to charge clients 25 cents a page for copying paper. So that was a profit center. So that was a way of making money. Now, that's less true today, fortunately, for the clients. But for small firms, this picture is a little different. Small firms can't as easily absorb inefficiency, right? Every penny that you save matters, and every second that you save by not getting bogged down in some tedious task of wrangling paper also matters. So for small firms, having too much paper is a massive problem. But fortunately, there's a solution. And the solution is to minimize the volume of paper that we have to manage. And that means converting paper into digital files, which will produce massive advantages. So those are just a few of the benefits of scanning paper into computer files. And we'll talk about some of the other benefits in a bit. But for now, let's just sum up the basic situation. The cost of storing paper has been steadily increasing and will continue to do so, whereas the cost of storing digital information will never reverse itself. It's always becoming less expensive. The cost is plummeting and will continue to do so going forward. At worst, the cost would level off. And just, so you have a point of comparison, the same unit of digital storage back in 2000 cost $10, in 2012 cost a dime. So we know that digital information is cheaper to store than paper, and that's just part of an ongoing trend. Now, shipping paper, on the other hand, is also expensive, different than digital stuff. And it can take days for the paper that you ship to arrive at its ultimate destination. But digital information is cheaper to transmit. Basically the cost is zero. The speed of transmission is nearly instantaneous. So those are additional powerful benefits that come from moving away from paper and into digital information. So managing lots of paper is a huge problem. And in many cases, it can bog you down completely. But the obvious solution is to convert the paper into digital files. And then that raises some questions. So let's address those. So I want to talk about the number one question that I hear from lawyers about this topic. Now, again, this is from lawyers who have decided they are just not going to be paperless. They think that this is like the checkmate question where they can just, ask this question and then they're going to win. This is the one that always comes up no matter what. And it's just a big misconception about what a paperless law practice actually is. So most lawyers in the past who heard the term paperless law office were skeptical and dismissive, and they'd say something along the lines of, isn't it impossible to get rid of all paper? So those are people that seem to believe the only way to have a, quote, paperless law practice is to get rid of every single piece of paper. Now, of course, that's impossible, right? And if you adopt that definition of what a paperless law practice is, then yeah, it's absolutely impossible to get rid of all paper, right? Because you'll never get rid of all the paper in your life, but you shouldn't try to, right? Because first of all, some paper is actually useful, right? You'll always have to deal with some paper in your law practice. That's fine. But the misunderstanding that most people put forth is that a paperless law practice is one in which you have no paper, and that is absolutely not true. A paperless law practice is about getting rid of the paper that keeps you bogged down, the paper that makes you inefficient. So what you want to strive for is having a lot less paper to manage. That's it. You're not trying to get rid of all the paper. Some of the paper is useful. So you want to keep things simple and manageable, right? So what you're trying to do is just strive steadily and smoothly to decrease the amount of paper that you have to deal with. And increasingly, over time, incredible things will start to happen. Like, for example, you'll be able to access any file in an instant on the internet. So anytime, anywhere, even if you're out of the office, you can access your files. You want this, right? And that's what you get when you shift away from managing paper and convert your information into digital format. So then the next question, once lawyers are all on board and say, yes, that's fine, we should be paperless, and I'm thinking about it, the next kind of checkmate type question is, well, there's some papers I have to keep. What are they? And then the question is, what are the papers that I have to keep? So the answer here is really, I think the better way to ask this question is not just what papers do I have to keep, but what papers should I keep? So, the papers you're required to keep are going to be things like, wills, promissory notes, maybe affidavits. I guess it depends on what they're for. Maybe your old files. I guess it depends on what the law is about the old files. But if you're required to keep A will, great, you keep it in paper form. You're required to keep a promissory note in paper form, that's fine. Now, those of you that have done litigation involving mortgages and things, you probably know when people lose a promissory note, you can prove the existence of that debt without the actual note. So it's not like, as an evidentiary requirement, you necessarily have to have all these documents. But if you're supposed to keep them, you keep them. But it's not going to be a lot of paper, right? The affidavits, I don't know if those are required to be in paper form, but I find that most judges tend to be kind of squirrely about that kind of thing. So it's better to keep affidavits in paper form and then just scan them as well so you have them that way. The old files, what you should do with that is immediately today amend your client engagement letter or your agreement that so that you can get rid of client files and you can get rid of them if they're in paper form. So in other words, you can tell the client, look, I scan everything. I'm going to keep your file in digital format. And if you give me paper or I get any paper in this matter, I'm going to tell you you can take it if you want. If you don't take it, I'm going to have it shredded. And that's what we're agreeing to. So if you agree to that up front, then you'll never have to wonder if you have to keep these files. You're saying to the client, you're giving them notice that you're going to shred paper or give it to them if they want to keep it, and then you're just going to manage things digitally. If you do that now, by the time you've become super paperless, you won't have to worry about this with those files that you are now, you have in completely digital format. So you should definitely do that today. And I have a model engagement letter provision for this that I'm happy to share with you, so you can see, what I use. And it's one that I copied from a legal ethics expert, so I feel pretty confident that it works. The papers you should keep, this is whatever makes your life easier. And, really whatever is going to make your life easier is probably whatever gives you peace of mind. So there may be some kind of documents that you aren't sure if you should keep, but you want to keep them. Now, you can't use this as a blanket, all-encompassing thing to say, well, I want to keep every piece of paper I already have. That's not what we're talking about. We're trying to become paperless and have less paper. But there might be some things that would keep that would make your life easier. I don't know. You have to decide what that is. But if you make the Venn diagram, papers I should keep because it makes my life easier, then you don't need to worry so much about what you're required to keep, because that's going to be included in everything that you feel like this is something that, will make my life easier. So that's the way to get over this mental hurdle, is just think about what papers you feel like you should keep. All right, so we've covered the common questions about going paperless, why to do it and what it really means to be paperless. So let's move on to discussing the equipment and the software that you will need. So obviously you will need a computer, but what other equipment will you need? Obviously a scanner, right? And many of you might already have a scanner. Okay, so the common question I've gotten over the years is this one, what scanner is the best one to get? Now, normally in the world of technology, there's never an absolute best. And there are rarely options out there that if they're not the best, that they're so much better than the other options that you're better off just getting that thing and not agonizing about evaluating the other options. However, when it comes to picking a scanner, we are in one of those rare but wonderful situations. And I can tell you that the best scanner to get is the Fujitsu ScanSnap, and the current model to get is the IX500. Now, let me say one thing first. If you have one of those multifunction scanners and you go, well, I have this multifunction, it's really great, I like it, I know how to use it, that's fine, but it's not as robust as this thing. So if you're going to be paperless, there are certain pieces of equipment you need to invest in, and by definition, having a dedicated scanner is one of those things. And in fact, you should get one of these scanners and put it on everyone's desk who might receive paper, or definitely tends to receive paper by mail or however they receive it. Because if there's only one scanner in the office and it's down the hallway and people have to get up out of their desks to walk down there, and then when they get there, somebody else is waiting in line, they're not going to scan things, and then your system's going to break down. So you need to have the scanner on everyone's desk. And granted, there may be some older lawyers who aren't going to be scanning things. You can, leave it off their desk, but it's very small. It's got a small footprint, and it costs about $400. You can look it up on Amazon, see all the great reviews about it. It's been around for a gazillion years, It was the first consumer grade scanner that was so robust that businesses started using it. And I realized that there are other scanners out there now. I think maybe the Canon scanner, and there may be one or two other ones that people say, well, it's just as good as the Fujitsu. And that may be true. But I'm just telling you that if you don't know which scanner to get this one, because it's been the best scanner for the longest period of time, and it just keeps getting better. So me, when I find something that works, I just go ahead and take that option. So some of the features, and there's lots of features, I'm not going to go over all of them, is that it's super fast. It can do 20 pages per minute. It's super reliable. I've had, several of these things over the years, just not because I needed to buy the new one, just because I want to buy the new one to see how it works. But these things work forever, and you might have to replace some parts, but they're sturdy workhorses. They can handle a lot of paper, and you can replace the parts that wear out. The automatic document feeder holds 50 sheets at a time, and this is why you want to get this version of the scanner and not the lower price models that Fujitsu sells, because they don't have a 50-sheet automatic document feeder. And if you're going to be serious about scanning paper, you need to scan a lot of it quickly. It will do what's called duplex scanning, which means when the piece of paper goes through the scanner will scan both sides of the piece of paper in one pass. But if it sees that there's nothing on one side of the paper, it'll just toss that page out. It will automatically detect if there's color on a page, and then it will scan in color. But otherwise, it will scan in black and white, which means that the black and white pages are smaller file sizes. So it's just a lot of things about the scanner that are optimizing the scanning. And it's also the software that comes with the scanner. So when I hear people talk about the neat receipt scanner that sometimes you see being sold in large airport hubs, at a kiosk, or you see it on TV sometimes, it looks like the same size, and I'm sure the scanner works fine. But the software that comes with that neat receipt scanner is not as good as the software that comes with the ScanSnap. And the ScanSnap even comes with some PDF software, which, depending on which software it is, I think it may be $200 to $300 worth of value. So when you're getting a $400 scanner and you're getting, an extra couple of $100 worth of software, and the software that comes with the scanner is great, I mean, there's really just no other option. This is the one you want. All right, so next question, what format should I scan to? Now, this is not a big question anymore. When I started creating my paperless practice, it wasn't clear what choice of format to use. And the big scanning services were converting to TIFF images, and they were adamant that that was the best format to use. And these days, if you do, big scanning jobs through the services, they might try to, have you use TIFF images. And I would avoid that, because PDFs are the way to go. Now, this all happened because federal courts were adopting e-filing, which started with bankruptcy courts, and their choice was the one that wound up being the dominant file format, which, as I said, is the PDF. So that's the format you're going to be converting your paper to, right? It's very clear. You want to scan into the PDF format. And the benefits of PDFs are that it looks and acts like paper, right? You scan it in, you scan a piece of paper into a PDF, and then if later on you want to recreate that paper again, you print it out, and it's going to look exactly the same as it did when you scanned it in. So it looks and acts like paper, but it does a lot more than paper. Now, some of the things it does that you can do with paper are you can highlight a PDF, which obviously you can do with paper as well. You can sign a PDF digitally and make it look like your signature has been, sandblasted onto the document. You can quickly bait stamp a whole batch of PDFs, a bunch of pages, like super fast. It won't miss a page, unlike paralegals who get bored and sometimes, do things carelessly or just make an understandable mistake. You can password protect PDFs, and you can also redact information in a PDF that you have, so that if you're involved in litigation, let's say, and you need to take out sensitive parts or obliterate them so that they can't be seen, there's a process by which you can redact. Now, if you read stories about people who get PDFs and it turns out that the information was still there, it's because the people didn't know how to redact the information. The press, of course, glosses over this because that's not as sensational to say that, somebody screwed up in a mundane way, so they make it a bigger deal, and they don't tend to focus on the fact that somebody just didn't know how to do redaction. But if you know how to protect your PDFs and redact things, that's very useful. But the most useful thing really is that when you've scanned all this information and made it searchable, which is easy to do, Then you can search for any text in those documents very quickly and very easily. So in other words, it's like doing a Google search on a batch of documents. You're going to pull up the documents very quickly. You're going to see the relevant ones. This is super powerful, way better than flipping through the documents yourself. So the PDF software that most people are familiar with are things like Adobe Reader, which is free. And then there's Adobe Acrobat, which it does many more things than the free Reader, but it costs a little bit more. So there are two versions of Adobe Acrobat. There's Adobe Acrobat Standard, which costs $300, or historically it's cost $300. And then there's Adobe Acrobat Professional, which does two things that the standard version doesn't do, namely the bait stamping and the redaction. So for that, you pay an extra $120. So what I always used to advise lawyers is that make sure you get, the standard version for the most part. And that's what used to come with the Fujitsu ScanSnap, but no longer does Fujitsu and Adobe like each other, so it doesn't come with the ScanSnap. But the standard version is fine. It's $300, does everything except bait stamping and redaction, but you don't do that often. If you're a litigation firm and find that you might do that periodically, then get one copy of Adobe Acrobat Professional for whoever is probably going to be doing the bait stamping and the redacting. So that's kind of how you can save money. Now, Adobe has changed its pricing for Adobe Acrobat. Now, you can still buy the versions, although they don't make it easy for you to find out where, but you can still, buy it and own it. And it costs the same thing. I think now it's $449 for professional and $300 for standard. But Adobe also offers subscription pricing. And the latest version of Adobe Acrobat is called Adobe Acrobat DC, which means document in the cloud, document cloud. And if you pay them $179 a year, you get the program. And then there's some additional features like the e-signing feature that Adobe has. It's called Adobe Sign. That's included in the subscription pricing. And then there's additional features like high compatibility with the mobile device that you would have on your iPad, let's say. So there might be some reasons you want to use subscription pricing. If you don't want to pay $179 a year, it's $240 a month. So they're basically encouraging you to pay, $179 a year. Now, if you're a Windows PC user, I recommend you use Nuance Power PDF software instead of Acrobat because it's less expensive and Nuance doesn't push you into a subscription plan. Nuance's software does everything that Acrobat does, and in some cases does it better. And it even does a few very useful things that Acrobat can't do. So I explain all this in my ebook, which is called Nuance Power PDF Essentials. I sell it for $14.95 on my website. But if you sign up for my new paperless course, I include it in there for free. I have a special deal on the course that I'll make available to those of you that attended today, and I'll tell you about it later on. Now, I know that most of the people tend to use Acrobat. And if you're a Mac user, then Acrobat really is the only sensible option. So how do you learn to use Acrobat software? Now, I wrote some books on using Adobe PDF software, but those books are outdated. Surprise, surprise. So here's a fabulous tip for learning how to use literally any kind of software related to your business. Lynda.com is this wonderful website that's been the #1 leader in online education related to software for over a decade. And most of the tech consultants I know use Lynda.com themselves to learn how to get up to speed quickly with any kind of software that they're dealing with, or if they need a refresher on using it. Lynda was acquired by LinkedIn a few years ago, and then LinkedIn was acquired by Microsoft. So this is a premier service run by one of the premier tech companies. And every one of you should have an account with Lynda and start using it to get up to speed with whatever software you're using or you are struggling to use more efficiently. I mean, Microsoft Word, Excel, Outlook, everything. But it's also great for learning to use PDF software like Adobe's Acrobat DC software. So here at the top, you see a comprehensive course on using Adobe Direct Cloud or Document Cloud that has 7 hours of video, which is a lot, but it's comprehensive, right? The next two are specialized courses that are only about 90 minutes long in terms of how much video they have. But let me show you more in depth what a course looks like. And I'll use the Adobe DC course as an example. So what you see here is on the left-hand side, there's a wonderful menu, and you can see that these videos are not just big, long videos of an hour each or half hour each. They tend to be 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute, and they cover very discrete topics. So you can go through and find the exact thing that you're learning how to do and skip around if you want to. You can bookmark the lessons that you want to come back to. There's a little bookmark icon. So it's very efficient in terms of getting out of it what you need quickly or getting back to it later to refresh. Now, the pricing is, you can try it for 1 month for free, but then it's basically $29 a month. Or if you pay, an annual basis, it's $240 or $250, where you save 17%. So there's all kinds of reasons to check out lynda.com. So I definitely would go check it out. It's free to try for 30 days. If you haven't tried it, you should definitely go in there and check it out. All right, so we've covered the first two agenda items, common questions, equipment, software. Now let's talk about document management. Now this is a far-reaching topic, right? So I'm not even going to pretend that I can cover it in much depth today, but we're going to talk about some of the important things regarding digital document management. Okay, so if you want the freedom to access your key information anytime and anywhere, even if you're out of the office, that means you have to embrace the cloud. Now, there was a time when lawyers were very wary of using the cloud, but today that seems like really far away as the Middle Ages. And the ignorant resistance of lawyers toward the cloud also seems like the ignorance that was prevalent in the Middle Ages. Now we know the cloud services are not only appropriate for lawyers, now we know they're indispensable. The power of using cloud services is incredible in both terms of lowering your costs and also creating huge advantages in how you manage your firm. Managing digital documents is already something you're doing. We've mentioned that. And, you have systems for organizing the information. Now you have information in paper, right? So you have systems for that, which is folders and file cabinets. But now you have digital documents in the form of email or word processing documents. So the question really is, what's the best way to manage all of your documents? Well, if you want to make your life easier, it's best to only have one system for managing your documents, right? Not just, one system for paper, one system for digital, because that gets confusing and laborious and agonizing. So once you've scanned all your key papers into digital form, then you can say, I am going to manage all of my documents in digital format. And then the question becomes, what technology will you use to manage all of your documents? Now, I have a 10-page paper that was created by a friend of mine who does document management services, and it's all about document management. That's also part of my my course that if you can get if you want it. But I'm just going to touch on this kind of briefly, and that is, if you're going to manage documents in a digital format, eventually you're going to want to use what's called DMS software, or document management system software. And at the moment, there are two leading companies. I'm going to leave out iManage for the moment, but there's WorldDocs, which has been around for a long time, and that many lawyers are using. And I'd say that that's probably the dominant document management system that's been used over the past, few years by medium to larger size firms. And I say medium to larger size because WorldDocs was expensive and it was beyond the financial reach of solo and small firm lawyers. But then came NetDocuments, which was a cloud-based document management system that in the beginning, you could get it if you were a solo lawyer. And now I think they require you to have to get 2 licenses or maybe even 5, because that's the natural trend for all these companies, is as they get bigger and they get enough of the smaller firms, they start moving for the bigger firms because it's easier for them. So NetDocuments is cloud-based document management system. And the advantages to using a document management system are there's less chaos in your system, because if you do it kind of the simple way, people can delete files, people can get permission and start looking at things they shouldn't be looking at. So you get a lot of chaos. These systems impose rigor and discipline, and NetDocuments is totally affordable for most small firms and solo lawyers. But if you don't want to go the DMS route because you're solo or you're just starting out, you can just use simple file management, which is just using kind of the system that you already have for things in your computer, right? Like folders and subfolders, and you just replicate the system you have with paper. So if you have pleadings and correspondence and documents, or whatever those things are as subfolders within your main matter, just create that in digital format and you're fine. I have a whole thing about this, about naming files, because that's the next question you come up with is, well, what do I name these files? And there should be a systematic way you name them. But let me just go through this and explain quickly. Basically, if you name them with a formula that produces files that look like this, then these files will automatically sort in chronological order so that you'll get, and you can quickly click on a button and say, show me the oldest at the top first, or show me the most recent ones, but it's going to go from recent to old or old to recent, and that's what you typically want. You want to be able to see usually the most recent stuff and then work backwards. And you want a file naming system that lets you kind of figure out what kind of document is it, and if it was, a correspondence or email, who was it from, and then who did it go to? So the formula for doing this is basically you have a date and then description, right? And the date, the formula for this is the year goes in front, then the month, then the day. And you want to use 4 digits for the year, and then 2 digits for the month, and then 2 digits for the day. So there's a consistency there, and so that it looks orderly and it sorts efficiently. Between those things, you can either put a dash, a slash, an underscore, whatever you want. I think most of the people I know feel like the dash is the least geeky looking, most natural looking, but whatever separator you want to use, you use the separator. And then afterwards, you have your system where you describe what the document is and so forth. So that's basically the system. All right, so the next question, is, okay, I'm doing all this, so what else should I be doing besides getting rid of the paper and setting all that up? And the biggie is you should definitely be securing your data. I think we all kind of know now that this is a big important thing for lawyers to do. And you should be securing your data against both data loss and infiltration. So data loss is, the files get corrupted or accidentally deleted. So you need to be backing up all of your information off-site and doing it in a reliable way. And this used to be a big deal and hard to do. Now it's super easy. There's all kinds of services out there. CrashPlan is one of them. Backblaze is another. You can Google, online backup, and you can find all of these things very easily. And they typically cost, maybe $50 to $100 a year for ungodly amounts of backup. And it all happens through the cloud, and that's wonderful. And it backs up your data as you're working on it. So you definitely want to protect against data loss, but you also want to protect against hackers. Now, I have a whole separate talk about this because it's important to understand how the hacking occurs. And it's less about the technology and more about the psychological manipulation that happens that goes along with the technology. So if you train yourself to be aware of what the psychological ploys are, then you will find that you will be very safe. And basically the hackers are just going after the easy targets. So what you want to do is not be at the back of the pack, right? The hackers prey on the least knowledgeable people. Unfortunately, lawyers are as ignorant about modern digital security as everyone else. But you need to understand how these hacks occur and then be prepared to avoid them. Basically, my main message would be don't click on links in emails with provocative headlines and provocative sentences that are short and could have been written by anyone, even if they come from a close friend or family member, because their account could have gotten hacked and then the hackers sending these emails out. So you have to train yourself not to be so quick to click on provocative links and emails. The main thing, though, is use a password manager and let it generate strong passwords. And, that's better than you trying to remember them. And if you do this, it'll make it harder for hackers to break into your personal information. All right, so then the last really big important question I always get is, how should I make this transition and how should I make it in a smooth way? And the answer is, just keep it simple, right? Work slowly at first, be patient, and then you can work out the kinks and get used to new ways of doing things and working in a very deliberate way with your digital files, right? Remember, you're already halfway there, at least halfway there. So now it's just about building a momentum steadily and strategically, right? And you'll find that you can increase your rate of momentum as you feel more comfortable and as you gain confidence in your new paperless system. Now, you may need help in the early stages, especially if you're part of a group of people all making the transition at once. So the last question typically is, well, who can help me make the transition, right? And the answer is, you need to get good at figuring out how to hire tech consultants. So here is the 5 qualities that every tech consultant that you hire should have. 1, obviously they should be knowledgeable about technology, but what kind of technology? Whatever kind you're asking them to help you with. So don't go hire, somebody who's good at building websites to help you figure out how to create a paperless system. You want to find the right person. And there's no all-in-one techie. There's no Swiss Army knife of techies who knows everything. At this point, technology is way too complicated. So you have to look for the right person. And you want the consultant to be reliable. You want to do consistent work. Now, here's the thing. A good tech consultant will invariably be popular and get lots of work. And unfortunately, many of them agree to take on too much work. And then they're overwhelmed, and that makes them unreliable. And solo consultants especially tend to fall prey to this, but not all of them, because the good ones are systematic and can manage their workload. Here's another thing that's important. The good consultants are more expensive. So if you want folks that are knowledgeable and reliable, don't be surprised if you have to pay more. But the good consultants are worth it, right? You shouldn't hire amateurs. You shouldn't work with your brother-in-law or somebody who's just kind of doing this on the side because they tend to be good at it. You want to hire professionals who get a lot of repetitions and have a lot of experience, because then they've seen it all. They understand what tends not to work. The people that are just doing it themselves know what works for them, but they tend not to realize that that's not necessarily what's going to work for everybody else. So I would be very careful about picking people, and making sure that these are people that are doing this full time. And then trustworthy is the hardest one, because you want somebody who's not going to take advantage of you, but since you don't properly know too much about technology, you're at a big disadvantage. So you need to find those rare tech consultants who are more interested in helping lawyers than in making a sale. Not that there's anything wrong with making sales. It's obviously good old-fashioned capitalism. But there's definitely something wrong with somebody steering you into a sale, knowing that you have a bigger problem that should be addressed first. So the best tech consultants that you work with would have a fiduciary mindset as opposed to a transactional one. Those folks are really hard to find, but if you need help, I'm happy to help steer you there. You also want to find people that can explain things in easy to understand language. So those are kind of the things you want from a tech consultant. All right, so we've covered all three of the agenda items, as I promised, but I want to quickly review the key things that we learned here today. So number one, we want to make the transition slowly and be patient, and then build up our momentum steadily. You definitely want to get the Fujitsu ScanSnap scanner, and if you have multiple people in your office, each one of them should get the scanner. It's $400, but I mean, if your barrier is I can't afford $400 or I don't want to pay $400, then my answer is you don't really want to be paperless. You need a dedicated scanner. It needs to be reliable. I can guarantee you this one is reliable. And of course, you want to improve your PDF skills, which you can do by reading books or by going on lynda.com. I think lynda.com is probably the fastest, best way. So check that out. You want to embrace the cloud wherever possible, meaning take advantage of it, because this is how you're going to collaborate more efficiently, and this is how you're going to store your information online better. And then last, use trustworthy consultants, the people that aren't going to try to steer you into things just because it benefits them without it being a benefit to you. And, there are a lot of people out there that know stuff, but not all of them, have the right heart. So find the people with the right heart. So that's pretty much getting close to it. If you want those resources I've been mentioning throughout the presentation, you can just visit paperlesschase.com and, visit this page, which is paperlesschase.com/speech. That's where I put all the resources I mentioned, plus some other ones I didn't have time to mention. There's a free course on going paperless. So if you hit that website and you see something like this, you enter your email address, you'll get a free 10-part email course that has a lot of the resources I mentioned linked to. But then you can, if you go to the one that says paperlesschase.com/speech, you can have access to my course, which normally costs $47. But if you grab it today, it'll be $7, and it'll include all the resources I mentioned plus more. So one final point. Now, remember I told you that I did commercial litigation, which is the kind of work that requires lots of paper and boxes, lots of paralegals to manage it all? Well, I didn't have paralegals as a solo. And yet from time to time, I found myself going up against firms with massive resources, including lots of paralegals and associates. And yeah, they had lots of resources, but I had a computer and I knew how to use it. And while my opponents were armed with paper and people, I had digital tools to make myself more efficient. So in trial, my opponents were often scrambling around to find the right papers at the right time. They were bungling. And this is all despite having massive resources. And this is because their billing model was conveniently tied to doing a lot, which wasn't necessary. But unfortunately for them, that made them less organized in trial, which was not good for them because judges have no patience for disorganized lawyers in trial, especially if they're from big firms, because then they have no excuse. So my use of technology turned out not only to be beneficial in terms of growing and running my practice, but it also became a tactical weapon. And it made me a veritable David who could slay Goliaths. And you know what? To me, that was the best part of creating a ninja efficient law practice. But here's the most important thing. All of this that I've talked about is possible for you too. You can leverage technology to improve your practice just like I did, and just like the many lawyers that I've spoken to over the past 10 years have. And you should, because you deserve a better practice. You deserve one that lets you feel in control of your finances and your operations, just like the other lawyers I've worked with. And in fact, let me introduce you to one of them right now. This is my friend Ray. We actually went to law school together back in the 80s. So he started his own firm, then it grew. He found it burdensome to operate and started getting disillusioned. So he got an offer from a big firm and thought it was his ticket to a life of greater ease. But just like with me, it turned out to be a trap. He hated the lack of control, the mindless committee meetings, so he wanted to start a solo practice. And me and some of his close friends who were tech savvy helped him start a solo practice. He began by reimagining everything about the way he practiced law, and he built the kind of practice that served his personal goals. And the other day I got a text message from Ray. He was in Maui, Hawaii, and he wanted to show me what his new life looked like. So here's what he texted me. He said, it's a beautiful day here. Solo practice has its advantages. He's attending a deposition in underwear and t-shirt. The depo is taking place in Birmingham, Alabama, and he obviously doesn't wish he was there, right? So like I said, what's possible for me and Ray is possible for you too. So if you want to start improving your practice, you can visit my Ernie the Attorney website and click on that link there if you want those free resources. Or you can visit my Paperless Chase website. There's a lot of great information there. Basically on both sides, there's information. It's free, most of it. But I want to leave you with this. I wish the best for you and your law practice. And hopefully you will find yourself relaxing somewhere nice soon, just like my friend Ray. This is Ray sitting on a hill with the Pacific Ocean in the background. He's doing work because in modern law practice, you can get stuff done anywhere, right? And so if you're in your office, you're in Hawaii, or in a foreign country like Panama, which is where this video is taken, all of this is possible if you shift to a paperless law practice. So that wraps it up. So I hope you have a clear sense of how to make your practice easier to manage. Go grab my resources if you want, and I'll look forward to helping you in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you.